Hello friends, this is David Sami and you are watching A Christian Journey. On this channel we talk about theology, philosophy, culture, everything that pertains to the Christian life. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the subject of suffering and hardship. Why does the Lord allow us to experience hardship? Why does He allow us to go through suffering? I know for me, when I became born again, the Lord dealt with me in such a personal way that I thought from that point on, I will never experience any suffering or hardship. I imagine the Israelites that came out of Egypt, they must have felt the same way. That after seeing all the miracles, that everything that the Lord did for them, how could they experience anything bad or any hardship? But what a surprise. Their wilderness journey was filled with difficulties and hardship. Now, 40 years later, in book of Deuteronomy, the Lord tells them to remember their wilderness journey, and He also tells them why they experience all the hardship and the suffering that they went through in the wilderness. I'm reading now in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 2 because I think there we may get a glimpse into the reasons why we have difficulties and why does the Lord take us to hard places and allow us to go through suffering. So I think Deuteronomy chapter 8 has a direct application to us. In chapter 8 verse 2, the Lord tells the Israelites, "You shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness." Now, verse 3, he goes on to say, "He humbled you and let you hunger, that He might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord." And on verse 5, he says, "Know then, the Lord your God disciplined you." And then in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 6, it tells us, "For the Lord disciplines the one He loves, and He chastises every son whom He receives." How the Lord dealt with the Israelites collectively in the wilderness would be the same way that He deals with us individually as Christians. You see, the wilderness lied between two destinations. They came out of Egypt and they were on their way to the land of Canaan. Between these two destinations lie the wilderness. And the Lord took them through the wilderness. Now, nobody lives in wilderness. We usually travel through wilderness to get to our destination. For us, it's the same thing. From the time that we are born again, we are on our way to heaven. But from the time that we are born again until we go to heaven lies this world. The wilderness represents the world for us. And the way that the Lord disciplined them in the wilderness is the same thing that He does with us Christians as individuals. That as we go through this world, the Lord disciplines us. Now, it's interesting to note that what He told them in Deuteronomy 8:2, He says that I humbled you. Now, the word humble has the idea of to depress, pressure, that I brought you to difficult circumstances, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you keep His commandment or not. Now, The first thing for us to remember is that during our journey here on earth, the Lord would bring us to places that are difficult, that seem to be puzzling, or we may really struggle with where we are. But the Lord brings us there into those pressure situations to see how we react. What is in our heart? You see, many times we think difficult situations, they make us do things that are not really us, but we are doing them because of the circumstances. But in reality, the circumstances reveal who we truly are. It's almost like a test where it reveals where our allegiances lie. Do we follow God's way when we are in a difficult situation? Or do we abandon God's way and do our own thing because it appears difficult? Many times we come to a fork in the road, into a difficult situation, that maybe in our heart of heart, we may know what the Lord wants us to do, but we think it's too hard. Or it may appear that if I went the Lord's way, it's not going to work out. The price is too high. And we take a road that seems best to us, or it makes the most sense. And usually, that's the wrong way. But we will never know how we behave until those circumstances present themselves. And it's the Lord Himself who leads us to those circumstances, to those places of hardship, to see how we react. And a lot of times, during those times, we may even pray and feel like we are not receiving any guidance or any direction, because in reality, the ball is in our court. The Lord wants to see, how do we choose? Do we choose His way and follow what we know to be His command and His ways, or do we do things our way? Also, the second thing that the Lord wants to accomplish, it says in verse 3, He humbled you to let you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Now, as we go through this world, He will bring us to places that are hard, places of hardship and suffering, to bring us to the end of ourselves, that by experience we will come to know that we are not sufficient by ourselves. We don't have all the answers. You may be the most capable person on the face of the earth, and the Lord would put you in a situation that you would not have the answer, and you would not know what to do. Or you could be a person who may not necessarily be very smart, but the situation that comes to you would be difficult enough that you will know that you don't have all the answer, and you can't go through this life depending on your own ability. And those circumstances, those places, slowly bring us by experience to rely on God. And it would prove to us ultimately that God's ways are good, that His commands are righteous, and they are the best thing for us. I know in my own personal life, I have come to a place of recognizing not only how good God is, but that God's ways are what is best for us. They are what ultimately bring us into who we need to become and how we need to be. And they, in a long run, produce the best results in our life. But you see, these hard places they do something for us. You see, we typically think the best life is a life that is absent of hardship, difficulties, and suffering. But in book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, verse 2, I believe, I'm going by memory, it says that it is better to be in the house of mourning than in the house of laughter. You see, if we never have any sufferings or hardship, we always remain immature. We remain a child. But it is through hardship and suffering where we ask the tough questions, when we begin to ponder on the meaning of life and try to find answer for the big picture, that what are the important things in life. But in the house of laughter, in a house of entertainment, it occupies us and we remain shallow. But it is through this hardship and suffering is where we develop depth. We become people who are deep and who will come to know by experience what God is like and what are His ways. And then the Lord says, know then, your God disciplines you. This is what He told the Israelite. And this is exactly what the Lord does to us. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 6, it says, for the Lord disciplines. And the word discipline has the idea of to train up a child. The Lord trains you because He loves you. And every person that gets adopted into the family of God, He chastises. He disciplines them for the purpose of training. But what does He want to accomplish? What does He want to do while the training is unfolding? What is His objective? What is His goal? You see, the same way that a parent has certain ideals and objectives and goals for their children, and they discipline them in order to bring about those objectives and those aspirations, the Lord has certain ideas and goals for us as well. That when you get adopted into the family of God, God trains you. And in book of Hebrews chapter 12 verse 10, it tells us, He disciplines us for our own good, that we may share His holiness. That His aim is that we share in His holiness, His moral purity, His cleanness, that we become separated from defilement and become morally pure and to be more like God. You see, friend, the greatest thing that can happen to us is not our worldly achievement or worldly education or how much we accumulate in life. But the greatest thing that ultimately brings us happiness and well-being is who do we become. And the Lord, when He adopts you, He puts you through His training program to make you to become the person that He intended you to be, to bear His image, to be like Him. That is ultimately what makes us to become fulfilled individual and what makes us to become the way we were meant to be. Our ultimate happiness lies in this fact that we become more like God. And the places that He takes you are designed for you specifically to bring about those objectives, that He will mold you and shape you and reveal Himself to you, that indeed His ways are the best ways, that indeed He is faithful, and that the more you allow Him to mold you to become like Him, your ultimate happiness and fulfillment lies in that fact. You see, friend, the hard places in life, suffering, is not arbitrary and is not without purpose. But it is designed, and it is in each one of us, it will take its unique form. For some, it may be difficult marriages. For others, maybe difficult kids, finances. Each of us, when we become born again, we will have our own wilderness journey. And the places that we become are uniquely designed for us. And those places, the bottom line is, how do we behave? But ultimately, the Lord would show us to ourselves that who we are and how much we are fallen and how we are so far away and removed from who we need to be. But that's the beginning of our training. And this training would take all of our lives. But as we go, the more we go on our road and the more we submit to the Lord, the more He will begin to shape us into His image and to be more like Him. So friend, if you are experiencing suffering, God knows and He sees, and you haven't arrived there arbitrarily. But maybe the Lord has led you to see what is in your heart, how do you behave, and to reveal to you that you don't live by bread alone, but that you live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And if you fail, if you find yourself that you didn't do what God wanted you to do, that in your heart of heart you knew what God wanted you to do, but you didn't, don't despair. God knows what we do from the day that we are born. We never surprise Him. But allow those failures to make you humble and make you patient with others as they have their shortcoming and that as they make their journey through this world. So, suffering for Christian is actually maybe a blessing, but it's in disguise. But it is hidden. But what I hope to do in this video is to shed light that maybe we look at suffering and hardship in a wrong way. That maybe there are goals and objectives that the Lord is accomplishing in our life through them. But He always knows where we are at, what we need. But be patient as you go through difficulties. And trust the Lord. Do things His way. Don't allow the fear of the consequences to deter you from what you know in your heart that you should do. Because every time I allow fear to deter me, I end up regretting it. But I'm beginning to learn that the fear is an illusion. But if I do things God's way, that He's the one that turns the circumstances toward what it needs to be. And whether the Lord rescues me or not, it really doesn't matter. But the big question, the big thing that we need to keep in mind is do things His way and leave the results to God. And accept whatever the result is. But know that ultimately God is for you and He's not against you. And He's the one that goes to transform you to become the person that you need to become. Well, I hope this would be of some help in shedding light on the subject of suffering and hardship in those difficult places. Now, may the Lord be with you. May He keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you and give you peace. This is David Sami with a Christian Journey.